Welcome back. In this video, we're going to go over the fabric flags that have to do with inputting or sending variables through the command line arguments and into either the patterns or into the user input, the text body or the inline message. So if we take a look at the flags real quick, we're looking at this flag and we are going to take a look at this flag, the -v or variable, and the input-has-vars. So to use these, I've set up a fabric pattern that I just quickly named 1AWV, and it's just so it pops up to the top of the patterns folder for me to be able to find it easily and analyze with variables. That's all we're doing. If we take a look at this pattern, you'll see the purpose and intent. I have two different variables that can be inserted into here. Within the steps section, there's a variable, and within the output instruction, there's a variable that can be sent from the command line variable flags with the fabric command. So to demonstrate using this, I also quickly whipped up a body of text. You can input text, user input to the fabric command, either inline or piping a body of text via a file or a report. So I just quickly made this up also to have some content to send to the fabric command and the pattern, analyze with variables, just so we have some kind of practical demonstration. It helps to understand better what's happening when you see a demonstration. At least I think so. So if we go in the terminal and get back into the directory where we have that fake report, then we can run this by catting the report to the fabric command, and we'll use that 1AWV. That's just the generic name for that demonstration pattern. And then we can put in the variable arguments or parameters, whatever you like to call them, which follows this format. One of the variables inside the pattern was domain, and we can put in, say, business analytics, and we can put in inputs for the various variables. So one thing to note, because we have these 4 variables in the pattern, you have to enter a variable for each one, and I'll show you right after this what it looks like if you don't. I screwed something up somewhere. I see it. And so what this did, we'll take a look at this by using dry run, and we'll see that right here was a variable pushed through, and in the various spots we can also take a look at this by removing the variable inputs and inserting the dry run command. Oh, and it won't even let you do it with the dry run. This is what happens if you leave a variable out, where there's a variable input in the pattern and you don't put a variable input in the command. It won't move on. It has to accept a variable if there's one in the pattern. So just to show you real quick, this is the pattern. We have a domain variable, context, focus, and tone. And so when you pass this pattern to the fabric tool, when it detects these double curly brackets in the pattern, it expects to have that variable filled in via the command line with the -v flag inputs. It won't move on and process anything until each of these variables in the pattern is satisfied, and then it'll move on. And if you don't have an input for context, it won't move on. It's going to kick an error. And then likewise with focus and tone. So you have to satisfy these things, these variable inputs in the patterns. And so we can take a look at this where we have you are an AI assistant specializing in domain. You can see in the dry run that was filled in with business analytics. And then likewise step 2 with the focus variable input, we had that filled in with key revenue drivers and engagement trends. And then the tone, ensure it adheres to concise and professional. So that's proof in your dry run that the variable system, the variable input system with the fabric tool works properly. And then you could also, if we were to not use a pattern that has variable inputs and we use anything else like AI, the AI pattern works, any of these would work with no variable inputs. And if we then went into and altered, and we'll do this real quick on the fly in the report, let's say we want to change the Q4 to, the Q report to indicate which quarter. For instance, this could be nearly anything. And we save that and quit out. Then if we run the same command, and there's one extra step that we would have to do. So if we put in variable and we have Q report, which this name right here would have to be the same thing as whatever you have here, the Q report. Those things have to match up, obviously. And then we could put in anything here. We could put Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, whatever. And this is if you have templated reports. You could input which quarter it is via this method. And then you could also add other variables in here that have the actual content. So if this were template it out. And then if you had a section of the template where you needed to fill it in with real data, you could also put in another variable here, for instance, that could look something like this. And what this little format does here, and we'll see this a lot as we get into some of the more sophisticated usage of the tool and scripting and things like that, where we have a file or multi-lines basically that we need to pass to a variable to fill in a generic template. If this were a larger template with a section that needed to be filled in with actual data, then you could specify at the command line which quarter, and then you could send however many lines of data via a file. And how this, there's also things that can happen where if you have new lines, new line characters, the \n, there's ways to account for that. And this actually, to be more precise, this would have to, I believe, be this. You would have to cat out this file, and you would also have to probably pre-process this for taking out new line characters so that you don't confuse the command line tool where it might process a new line character as a separate argument. And so you would want this multi-line data file to fill in the report. You would want it to be one continuous string, in which case you replace new lines like so. And this is what that command would then look like this. If you were automating this and we're using a different report that was templated out and things like that, if you wanted to pass a template file, have it processed by the analyzing with variables pattern, and that pattern would be named something else more applicable to what you're doing, passing it a different quarterly indicator with different quarterly data, this coming from a file that's entirely separate from the template file. And that's a good example of just how sophisticated you can get with this tool. It can do a lot more than just, and I say just because I don't mean that in any negative way, just running direct commands like extract wisdom from a YouTube video. This thing is capable of so much more in the business world. It's really kind of ridiculous what the capabilities are here. It's pretty impressive once you understand how the tool works, and then also integrate it with automation as you would understand it once you get into Bash and command line scripting in general. This thing can get pretty crazy, because then you can run it in a script where you iterate through Q1 through Q4 with different data files filling in a section of a templated report, and then having that templated report run through a fabric pattern, and it can do so much. It's really crazy. This wouldn't be that surprising to someone that already implements a lot of automation at the command line, but they'll be impressed at just how easy the fabric tool makes integrating into those workflows that someone like that would already understand. It's really awesome. It's a really useful tool. So back to this, just to show that this would work, instead of taking off in all these very complex ideas, just using this report with the Q report, and here with this key value pair of the -v flag. If you're going to have spaces, then you would need to put this in quotes. So Q1, I believe, is going to work just fine. But if we want to put Q1 report, we would have to do something like this. And if you're going to pass a variable, not to the pattern, but to the input, the user input, which in this case is the report.txt, this is where we have to add the secondary flag, input-has-vars. And sorry, we need to run this because we have variable inputs in this pattern. We have to use a pattern that doesn't have variable input so that we don't get that showstopper right there. And so now it'll run thinking that our input is for Q1 because that's what we passed via the V flag and the input-has-vars flag. So it's fairly, I'm trying to make this simple, and I'm trying to make a pretty complex situation pretty simple, because that's, in reality, that's what the Fabric tool is allowing us to do, is have very complex interactions with our data and with our patterns and with variables passing through to either patterns or the data. It makes that very easy with these couple two flags. So I hope that makes clear how to use the variable and input-has-vars flags. It's trying to make this as straightforward as possible, because the quicker or the better that you understand it, the sooner you're going to really be able to empower your workflow with this. And I'm just trying to make learning this aspect of these couple flags, I'm trying to make it learning these things as comfortable as possible. There's a lot of other examples that you could do. We could iterate, we could do scripting to show iteration and things like that. But that, I could really start turning this into a pretty long video. And my goal here is to make these things a lot smoother and more comfortable to get through. That's why I also decided to break up the advanced, what I call the advanced level flags, from 1 or 2 longer videos into, probably at least 4 much shorter, more concise videos. So I hope that was clear, and we'll see you over in the next one.